held the title. And so I used to hear that, but, I just thought maybe he was a good gold gloves boxer. But when I started researching one day, what I realized was this guy was ranked number 2 and 3 in the world. And I said, man, this is a story. So that's what started me to looking at the lightweight division. So I took his life, and he was a Golden Gloves boxer, and he won, they used to have a big tournament of champions in Chicago. He won that in the lightweight division. He fought in the military. He was a champion of the Pacific Islands. He did a lot of things. And then in 1946, 47, after the war, 46, he turned professional. And this guy ended up beating 3 world champions. He beat, and this is all in the lightweight division. At that time, Ike Williams was the world champion. Ike Williams was not fighting. He would not fight this guy at all. But he would spar with him, but he never was fighting. But he beat Jimmy Carter. He beat Joe Brown. It was one more. Shucks, I'm forgetting his name right now. I'll call him in a minute. But he beat all of these guys. And but what happened was in 1950, they would starve the fighters out in California. And what they would do is they wouldn't give you a fight. And then they would say, hey, look, we got a big fight for you, but if you take this fight, you got to lose. And so the guys were starved out. And so what they do is they were rigging the fights. This was the mob who was doing this. And these are people like Babe McCoy, Mickey Cohen. If you ever heard of Mickey Cohen, mobster, all of them had their calls. Yeah. This is all going on in L.A. Matter of fact, I write this great thing about all what was going on in L.A. And so they would starve the boxers out. And the guy who lived across the street from me, grew up across the street from me, he threw a fight against Art Aragon. And Art Aragon, he's in the Boxing Hall of Fame, by the way. So he threw a fight against Art Aragon. But here's the interesting thing. That was in 1950. In 1956, there was an investigation. And so my guy came back, Tommy Campbell, and he testified against the mob and told them about the fixed fight that they tried to fix on him. And then other fighters came, and they started talking about fixed fights. It was about 30 or 40 fixed fights, and they were fixing the fights all the way to the title. And so it's a great story, and my working title in that book is Tommy Campbell, A Boxing Bout with the Mob. And so almost all your champions and things like that, the mob is all in there, and I try to explain it the best I can for just a person who probably doesn't follow boxing, but they can follow this story. So that's kind of what I do. And it was a great period. Matter of fact, we probably had champions in every division, and people who got to be champions probably never should have been champions if not for the mob.
That's a sad situation in itself, but it's the America that we lived in. So, it's kind of, if they say you can't fight City Hall, and at that time you definitely couldn't fight the mob.
Oh, yeah. And you know what? I watch boxing bouts today, and sometimes I wonder if we're still not living in that period.
Oh, yeah.
We're fights are fixed. So,
this fight Saturday. That seems like some type of fix with this guy who was a substitute teacher in Australia. Now he's fighting Crawford. Then I'm like, how do you beat Manny Pacquiao, which you really didn't do, and now you're fighting Terrence Crawford, one of the best boxers on earth? That's neither here nor there. I'm with you. Sometimes you wonder what's going on.
Well, in boxing, the big draw was the black guy against the white guy, and the mob knew how to manipulate that in such a way to make money. And then here's the thing with the mob, they fixed the fight, and so now all the betting's rigged because nobody knows the fight's rigged. So all the mob guys bet, they would only bet on a sure thing. So they were betting on a sure thing and walking away with millions.
Kind of like the fictitious fight in Harlem Night, when the fight was supposed to be fixed and it ended up not being fixed. But definitely. Yeah, no, it's really interesting how that history plays out. But the thing is that it robbed some of our great black athletes of careers that they should have been prolific in. Instead, these guys were manipulated and used.
And the same could be said about some of the Negro League baseball players, too. There are people who should have been awfully great, never got to the major leagues, never made the money their gifts should have been owed. And, it's a sad commentary on this country. But, through it all, we survived, and there's stories to be told.
Okay, you know what? For years, I've heard Jackie Robinson wasn't even the best ball player at that time. Please give us some of the people that we can look up that was playing around that time that even though Jackie Robinson was the best choice socially, athletically, who are some of the people that you would have said they should have picked instead of our brother Jackie Robinson?
Well, one thing. Here's one of the myths. One of the myths is that they were trying to find the perfect man, right? Well, they found a pretty good man in Jackie Robinson, and they found a pretty good man in Larry Doby. But right behind, they signed Hank Thompson and Willard Brown. Now Hank Thompson has shot a man, and and so when he's with the Kansas City Monarchs, and so they have Hank Thompson. Matter of fact, then they get Willard Brown. Willard Brown was so outspoken, and Willard Brown, if he didn't feel like running after the ball, he wasn't going to run. So what happened to this picking the top athlete? What they did was they went and started picking the best ball player. And so Jackie Robinson was a good choice. He did what he needed to do, and we know the rest is history on that. But you know what? There were a lot of good black ball players. But, a lot of the guys told me, though, what Jackie took, they said they wouldn't have took that. So
right.
They said probably a good thing Jackie went first because they said we weren't going to take what he took.
Mm.
And what's interesting? I used to talk to Joe Black. And Jackie was taking a lot on the field. And Joe told me that sometime after the game, some of these guys would give him hell on the field, and he meet him under the bleachers. He meet him under the bleachers after the game. Nobody knew about it, and they'd have fights under the bleachers.
Jackie and these guys.
Yeah, I got that from Joe Black. Got that from Joe Black.
Yeah.
And a lot of that, I never have read about that in any book. I got that straight from Joe Black.
Oh, yeah, you definitely won't hear about the day that the black dude beat up the superstar white guy. We won't be hearing about that. We can barely hear about these stories in general.
Well, and Joe said Jackie could fight, too. So
yeah, I've heard that he was a no-nonsense guy. And they showed snippets of that in the movie. They gave you the impression that messing with Jackie Robinson was just not a smart deal, and I'm glad they gave you a piece of that because, again, we only get the fluff, and nobody wants to hear about somebody being violent. Nobody wants to hear about things of that nature, but it's also good to understand that the brothers and sisters before us were not just pushovers because in liking what the statement said, like people like Kanye and others, people think that our community was just filled with people who would capitulate and kowtow and just bow down. But we do have a fighting nature inside of us. Let me have some more players that we can look up because this is extremely interesting to me.
Well, one of my favorites, and I actually believe, they talk about Josh Gibson and his power. He had sure power, no doubt about it. But there was another guy named Willard Brown. To me, and I'm pretty much going to prove this, if I live long enough to finish writing all the books, Willard Brown hit more home runs than Josh Gibson. I'm almost sure of that.
See, I've never even heard that name.
Yeah, Willard Brown. He died in Houston. Matter of fact, I interviewed Willard Brown. And Willard Brown was a tremendous player. He used a 40-ounce bat and he just had power. And but he was a Josh Gibson type of player, but he played out west, and through the years, he doesn't get the recognition that you would get for a Josh Gibson. But that's a name you want to know. And I tell you another guy, Grant Home Run Johnson, before the turn of the century. There was the dead ball era. And so up to about actually till Ruth came along, and then they came up with the livelier ball. But in 1894, this guy hit 60 home runs.
Oh, wow.
And today,
what's his guy's name again?
Grant Home Run Johnson. They called him Home Run for a reason. Grant Home Run Johnson. He was out of Findlay, Ohio. And his 60 home runs in 1894. Unheard of. He had that kind of power in the dead ball era. And then, you get around, and then, they rave about Ty Cobb. He won a Triple Crown with 11 home runs. This guy couldn't get in the league. And, he hit 94 almost before when Ty Cobb was wearing knickers.
Exactly. I mean, Ty Cobb and Babe Ruth run around the neighborhood shaking hands and stealing candy out of their mom's purse. And this guy's a superstar. He's doing what guys can't do today.
Yeah.
And again, I'm listening.
Yeah, and the sad part is, we don't gravitate to this history like we should as black people, and I wish that we would better. And I travel around the country, and and I can go into a city that has a mega black population. They can put me in the black library, and I'll still have more white people coming to hear me than black people. So we've got to get hungry for this history, and then we can begin to tell these stories and digest it the way that we want it to be delivered. And I think that's so important. And I just feel blessed, that I've been able to add my little contribution to it, and I'm trying to do more before I check out of here. But there's lots of work to do, and there's lots for everybody.
Definitely. It is something that is very needed. Again, man, like I don't want to make it seem as if being an athlete is the end all be all, but I do want people to understand we can use these figures from the Negro Leagues and from our past, anybody from our past, to instill pride and determination into our young people, because if they're going to get it from somewhere, this is why a lot of these young people are running around clueless, because all you know is, hey, you used to be a slave and used to be this and used to be that, and that's just not our history. Our history is a proud history. Our history is a distinguished history, and we need to start attending these events. We need to start paying attention to people like yourself. We need to start purchasing your books. Can I have the title to some of your books so I can start tweeting about them, so I can start putting them out on Instagram, so I can start putting them on my website, and so forth and so on, because I'll do my very best to get this information out.
Well, two of them are. One of them is Andrew Root Foster, A Harvest on Freedom's Fields. That's one I would encourage people to read. And it's about Andrew Root Foster and all the people he was associated with up through 1910. And so if you read this, you're going to get a lot of history prior to 1910, and you got to realize that, wait a minute, there's nothing new under the sun. We've already done this. And so that's one book. And then I recommend Wilbur Bullet Logan and the Kansas City Monarchs. That's another one I would recommend because it talks about, for a person like me to come along and say, hey, I believe this guy is the greatest baseball player of all time, and then prove it through a book. Because, when I came along, the greatest baseball player of all time, that's the one who could hit pitchers, Babe Ruth. So to even be able to challenge that, it took a lot of work. It took a lot of research, but I think I did a pretty good job. And Wilbur Bullet Logan, you will enjoy knowing about him. He could do it all. And those are two. And then my book, The Negro Baseball Leagues of Photographic History, it's out of print, but you can pick it up on Amazon used books. You'll see library discards out there. What you won't see, matter of fact, you won't find my books on the discount table. People hang on to them. So it's kind of tough to find. You almost have to get them from those sources. Yeah. So that
just means that's quality writing. That's great information that you provide.
And it's all about the information and the stories. So the best way to get people interested in the history is to be able to tell stories about the history. And I think that's important. Be able to tell the stories. about all these people. And you know, when I talk about, matter of fact, I'm getting ready to do a revision of my book on John Buck O'Neill.